Hi there, it's Matt here, and welcome back to the podcast, and welcome back to another of our AMA episodes, Ask Me Anything episodes. We've got a long list of questions, so we're just going to dive straight in. But as always, I am joined by the unparalleled, the unmatched brilliance that is Dr. Eti Ben Simon. Eti, welcome back.
Great to be here, Matt.
Okay, Eti, so with all of that said, why don't we just jump in and start with the first question?
The first question is a very intriguing one. Someone is saying, since moving to Finland for work, my sleep has completely changed. Does latitude really affect sleep that dramatically?
Yes, for some period of time until which your system will acclimate at least. So I guess there's two things. The first is the initial move there. And that's all the jet lag and the circadian disruption. But that's not, I think, what this person is talking about. Latitude can significantly influence sleep due to differences in the amount of daylight exposure, the timing of the sun, and the seasonality of that light, all of which basically impacts both your circadian rhythms and in part by way through melatonin signaling. There has been some work done looking at Nordic countries, including Finland, that showed that during midnight sun or polar twilight periods, individuals often report later sleep onsets, lower sleep efficiency, and an increased phase delay, essentially in the summer months. So, not really a big surprise there, but if you are at the equator, you're getting really nice, usually very consistent sinusoidal waves of light and dark, light and dark. And that happens day after day, month after month, irrespective of the month of the year, with some minor modifications. But once you get in the high latitude areas, then all of a sudden, if you're in Finland during the summer, you're going to have light at almost all times of day. So no wonder your brain gets confused. And that's why you really have to be so careful to ensconce yourself in as much darkness at night, even though it's still light outside. Otherwise, you will suffer those issues. And people, they were these sort of more national representative samples. When you are in the summer phase and there's constant light outside, you go to bed later, the efficiency of your sleep is not as good, and you end up sort of wanting to wake up later, but you still have to get to work, all of which leads to a reduced total sleep time. Why is that? It's in part because your circadian rhythm that you have, and everyone has a circadian rhythm, this 24-hour cycle, isn't quite 24 hours if you're left to your own devices. Most of us run a little bit long. We usually sort of run, let's say, 24 hours and 10 minutes. So our internal 24-hour clock is not of a precision that any Swiss court.
Not even close.
Yeah. But thankfully, we have lots of little fingers, like on a wristwatch sort of situation, that will come along, and each day they will reset us to precisely 24 hours. The most powerful resetting set of fingers that we have is light. And that is the principal, what we call Zeitgeber or time giver, to reset our circadian rhythm. But in high latitude summers, it offers extended daylight that will prevent the accurate sort of resetting, as it were. It will keep melatonin suppressed. And that melatonin, which signals darkness, is delayed many hours later than it would otherwise. And then, if that weren't bad enough, you have the reverse problem in the winter, where you get too much winter darkness and not enough daylight. And as a consequence, that leads to the opposite, which is instead of excessive amounts of wakefulness, you get excessive amounts of drowsiness. And you can also get, as a consequence of that circadian disruption and sleep disruption, things such as seasonal depressive symptoms, or SAD, which is seasonal affective disorder. Some of this, by the way, the subtle twists here. Your chronotype, if you are a late to bed type, a night owl, that may actually intensify the adaptation challenges. What can you do about it? Well, a lot of these countries will implement the use of bright artificial light that tries to mimic natural light. And they usually do that in the winter months where you have this big light box, and as you're getting ready or you're having your breakfast or you're sitting there in the first hours of work, you get bright light exposure in the winter to try to increase artificially the amount of natural light that you're getting. And then in the summer, you reverse engineer that. You get home, and by 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, even though it's bright sunlight outside, blackout curtains, sleep mask at night, block the ambient summer light. What do you have thoughts on there?
Just a personal experience. The other side of Finland, Patagonia, I was there in the summer month, 10 p.m., bright light, and I was so tired because I was hiking. I was really amazed at the effect. I just felt like I can't go to sleep. It's too early. I can't go to sleep. And it really did take a couple of hours to fall asleep, even though I was really tired. The effect is so dramatic.
It's impressive. And I remember being in Sweden, ironically, for a sleep conference on June the 23rd, 2 days after the summer solstice. So it was at peak sleep disruption. And it was the strangest feeling. You're absolutely right that there is this complete paradoxical mismatch between your internal state of fatigue and tiredness and the external world
Mhm.
around you screaming at you, go out, it's time to be awake, it's morning. And you're
Yeah.
thinking, "No, I don't know what's going on." It is a very surreal psychological versus physiological mismatch. And we forget how contextual sleep is as a process, psychologically, not just physiologically.
Yeah, it's almost like a type of jet lag that's not related to planes. It's like,
Correct. It's a perennial jet lag for several summer months
yeah,
in the northern latitudes.
we
Yeah.
should call it let lag. I said it first.
Trademark. Um, all right.
um,
Next question.
Before we move on, you said something that it might be worse for night owls. And as a night owl, I was intrigued. Would it be worse just for one season or just all across the board?
It seems to be all across the board that night owls, if anything, because the way society is structured, etc., you need to almost artificially ensconce yourself in darkness earlier in the night because you're already someone who wants to be sleeping later, going to bed later and waking up later. So to try to be complicit with society's type A early bird catches the worm mentality, you have to use darkness even more so at night to try to help you. And
Hmm.
therefore, that light at night is pushing you as the night owl even further into the future, which is already your problem to begin with, even if it's the middle of autumn. So
Hmm.
that's why it can be more problematic.
So the next question is kind of related to that. Something I get asked a lot is sleep before midnight better? The listener is saying every so often I hear that sleep before midnight is of better quality than the one after, and the listener is a night owl. So, what do you think about that?
This is a great sleep myth. And
Hmm.
there is no really good evidence in support of this in the absolute, in the binary. I've heard sleep before midnight is twice as valuable as sleep after midnight. There is nothing about the sleep that you get at 12:01 a.m. that is any worse than the sleep that you were getting at 11:59 p.m. It's not like you turn into a sleep peach or an apple or a pumpkin, whatever it is, at midnight and all things go to hell in a handbasket. The common belief that's held or misbelief stems from social convention. But scientifically, sleep quality actually much more strongly hinges on alignment with your internal circadian rhythm, not with what time it says on the clock face. In other words, sleep that is aligned with your chronotype, morning type, evening type, or somewhere in between, and therefore your melatonin biological onset is much more predictive of how high the restorative value of your sleep is relative to where it simply occurs before or after the strike of midnight. So, no, there is nothing so special about that. Now, I would say that the sleep that you get in the first half of the night is more dominated by deep sleep. And the sleep that you get in the second half of the night is more dominated by REM sleep. Such that if I naturally would go to sleep at, let's say, 11 p.m., and I wake up at 7 a.m., but this time I go to sleep now at not 11 p.m., but I go to bed at 4 a.m., am I going to get the same amount of deep sleep? And let's say that I sleep from 4 a.m. and I sleep the full 8 hours starting at 4 a.m. Am I going to get the same amount of deep sleep? No, I'm not, because my brain doesn't feel as hungry for deep sleep by 4 a.m. because there is some degree of circadian rhythmic dependency. Not entirely. Slow wave sleep is actually strongly related to the amount of sleep pressure, but still, there is some circadian modulation of it. All of which is to say, a very long winded way of saying there is no universal magic hour before midnight. Sleep quality depends primarily on how well your sleep aligns with your own innate biological timing, your morningness versus eveningness, and how consistent also you are in maintaining that rhythm. Worry about those two things. Don't worry about the clock face.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Regularity is the most important part when it comes to getting all of your stages and all of your good quality sleep.
Hands down, right amount of sleep opportunity, time in bed, right amount of regularity, and then keep an eye out for quality.
And I think that it kind of relates to the mentality we're talking about before. Early bird catches the worm. And so it kind of comes into this sphere of everything that is getting to bed too late is just as bad as not getting up early in the morning.
Yeah, it's funny that there is this still stigma against night owls. People say, well, the night owls, why do you wake up so late in the morning? You're so lazy. Well, why can't we turn the tables and say for the morning types, you go to bed so early, you're lazy? And I often joke that people say the early bird catches the worm, and that may be true, but the second mouse gets the cheese. Anyway, moving on.
Nice.
A partner for today's episode is AG1. I've been using AG1 for quite some time now, and just for the record, I buy it myself to stay away from any of those trappings of free product. AG1 has just released the new formulation, which is AG1 Next Gen. It's still one scoop once a day, but now comes with many upgraded probiotics, plus additional vitamins and minerals. I also explored their 4 human clinical trials to prove out their efficacy, with the data showing a marked boost in healthy gut bacteria. And that's the thing. I appreciate how AG1 keeps adapting to new scientific findings. They have made many formula changes over the years, and each new iteration keeps it at the cutting edge of this space. As I've mentioned, I began my AG1 journey over 4 years ago. Any company that holds their scientific rigor to the flames of clinical trials means a lot to me. So subscribe today to try the next gen of AG1. If you use the following link, you'll also get a free bottle of AGD 3K2, as well as an AG1 welcome kit and 5 of the upgraded AG1 travel packs with your first order. So make sure to check out drinkag1.com/Matt Walker. That's drinkag1.com/Matt Walker.
Next question. What part of the brain allows us to shut off pain while we sleep, if this happens at all? And if this is a mechanism in our brain, can we somehow identify it and manipulate it to help with pain management when we're awake? It's a good idea.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And it brings us onto a broader issue, which is sensory perception writ large. So I would say to the listener, the answer is yes and no. Yes, you will be able to suppress a certain amount of pain during sleep, but the same is true for almost any other of the 5 senses. And there is a mechanism that is known in the brain that allows you to essentially dislocate yourself from a sensory perspective from the outside world and, with pain to a degree, your internal world. And the way it works is that there's a structure deep inside the brain called the thalamus. And the thalamus is essentially like the sensory gate of the brain. So sound, taste, touch, smell, and signals of nociception of pain, they will typically pass through from all of their respective channels, and they'll all feed into this central structure, the thalamus. And then the thalamus acts like this sensory gate, and it will determine what of all of those sensory perceptual signals are sent up to your cortex at the top of your brain. And when your cortex starts to process them, only then do you become consciously aware of them. Why is this relevant for sleep? Well, as we start to fall asleep, the sensory gate of the thalamus starts to close shut. And therefore, technically, your eyes are still seeing, your ears are still hearing. That burn on the back of my hand because I'm a terrible cook is still signaling pain to my brain, but it's never passed up through the thalamus up to my cortex because the gate of the thalamus is closed shut. And therefore, I have stopped perceiving those sensory perceptual signals, which is simply another way of saying I've stopped perceiving the outside and my own internal environmental awareness, which is just another way of saying I've fallen asleep. Now, it turns out that if you get a bang in your environment that's loud enough, or the pain from the broken leg that you just got is significant enough, they will always break through that barrier, that gate of the thalamus, and they will still go up to the cortex. So if there is something that is sensorially significant enough, it still has the ability to break through the gate of the thalamus and get perceived by the cortex. At that point, you wake up. So that's the reason that we can shut off pain and we can shut off most all other sensory perceptions during sleep. But it's not to say that it is an irreversible process. It is a reversible process, and it can be reversed if those things are too substantive as we're sleeping, or finally, once we're done with sleep, the gate of the sensory thalamus starts to open back up again, and we get the world flitting back into our conscious perception.
Yes, and also meaningful stimuli. For instance, if someone says your name, is more likely to wake you up than other voices at the same threshold.
Yeah, there's a great study back in 2001. I'm dating myself here, by Chiara Portis at UCL, University College London. And they did an even more clever twist on this. They had people inside of an MRI scanner. They had them fall asleep. And once they were asleep, they started playing specific tones and specific words and auditory sensory stimuli to the brain at the same decibel level. But in some of those conditions, they were presenting very salient words to the individuals, such as their own name, or the name of their child, or the sound of their crying child. And even though all of the auditory stimuli were normalized to have the same decibel level and the same duration of time, the things that were most salient to the individual ended up being processed in the brain in a very different way. Now, it turned out that for the most part, none of these people woke up because they didn't play them quite loud enough to wake them up. And that was the clever part of the study. It says that even when we're asleep, things that are salient to us will break through the brain barrier and still be processed in a subconscious way relative to things that are not salient. So your brain is still clever and smart and wanting to process things that are probably very relevant to you, even though you're still asleep. Cool study, right?
Sleep is such an amazing state because you are on the border of being part of the world and then kind of being engulfed in your own internal world. And that ability to reverse it and play with it is so magnificent. It's really unique.
And it's adapted to so many different things along the way. There are so many ways that sleep has had to contort itself to remain present across the evolutionary path. This is one very subtle one. Another one that's dramatic is amphibious mammals. So things like otters or dolphins, what they have to do, they have to keep surfacing, and they have to do that 24/7. So when do they sleep? because if you sleep, you're going to be submerged and you'll drown. So nature found a way to figure this out, and it's called unihemispheric sleep. And they will sleep with one half of their brain, and the other half will be awake to allow them to resurface and breathe. It would have been so much easier, you think, if sleep wasn't absolutely essential, non-negotiable biological necessity. If it was somewhat debatable in the way that we sometimes think of sleep as negotiable each night, then you would have just said, well, forget all of this rewiring of the brain and creating half a brain sleeping and the other half awake. Let's just do away with sleep. It's just a much easier problem to solve than trying to. No, sleep is so important that it has been contorted in all sorts of ways so that every single species still is able to obtain it. Sleep is bloody remarkable. All
It
right,
is. It
next
is.
question.
Do we want to touch a bit on how can we try to use it while awake? Is there something we can do to kind of hijack this mechanism to help regulate
Yeah,
pain?
I don't think there is necessarily. I mean, the way that most of our analgesics work, some of them will work at the level of the thalamus. Things like anesthesia, for example, is a state where you really are
Yeah.
going into sort of a decorticalized state, as it were. But then there are lots of different ways that you can modulate pain. You can do it locally by trying to, numb it. So, for example, you can be at the dentist, and I'm not going to insert anything into your brain and knock out the thalamus. I'm simply going to locally numb you in the area where the branch of nerves is going to be in pain, and therefore the signal is never transmitted up to the brain to begin with. So you can cut off the pain signal much earlier in the pathway, or you can cut it off at any moment during the pathway, all the way up to the thalamus and then to the cortex. So, yeah, I don't think there's a way that you can use sleep to modulate pain, though. Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I think that for us to be able to use this mechanism would be quite invasive. So we don't know how to do that non invasively yet. But I just like that this question touches on something that I don't think we've tapped enough into as sleep scientists, which is really to use the wonderful spectrum of the sleeping brain to take things that we can use during wakefulness, learning mechanisms, pain management, things like that. We know that sleep is really good at doing that, and we can use a lot of these techniques during wakeful hours. So I think it's just a really interesting, fascinating direction to take.
Yeah, sleep is bloody remarkable.
Next
N-
question.
Next question. Okay, time for some honesty. I've probably eaten more protein bars in my lifetime than I've actually blinked. They've been such a constant for me throughout my life. I recently found David protein bars, and it was my friend Dr. Peter Attia who raised awareness about David. He played a key role in the development of this really quite radical new protein bar. And just hearing it from Peter, knowing his standards, that's all I needed to at least consider making the switch. And then I read about the company. They are fantastic. The bars are built on a simple, groundbreaking concept: the fewest calories for the most amount of protein, period, ever. And each bar contains a wonderful 28 grams of protein at just 150 calories. They have 0 grams of sugar as well. That is the best protein to calorie ratio that has ever been seen in a protein bar. The taste, exceptional. I almost have to ration them. They're that good, because I could probably inhale about 10 of them in one go. Protein, of course, by the way, it's critical. It's not just for building and maintaining muscles. It's for managing metabolic health, helping you feel fuller for longer. And it's that unique ratio that I think makes David protein bars, just for me at least, the most satiating that I've also ever experienced. They are fantastic. They've got 6 incredible flavors. And here's a bonus: when you buy 4 cartons, you get a 5th entirely free. If protein bars are your thing, even if they're not your thing and you're considering them, just go on over to davidprotein.com/Matt Walker. That's davidprotein.com/Matt Walker, and you will get a wonderful experience in terms of that bonus. Okay, back to the show.
So, this is about lowering core body temperature. So, the listener is saying, I found the sleep advice around lowering the core temperature at night very interesting, but I'm still not sure on the details. Warm socks or not, warm blankets or not, warm PJs or not. The colder the room, the warmer I tend to dress and prepare the bedclothes at night. So, I have difficulties falling asleep with cold feet. So, in short, how do I regulate my core body temperature in practice when in bed? Is there more to know about how the body regulates temperature and what counts as core and what as periphery? Very good question.
Very good question, too. So, really, what we're talking about here is the central trunk of the body versus the arms, particularly the hands, and then the legs, particularly the feet, and then the head, including the face. Now, of course, no one wants to be dangling their arms and their feet out of the bed to regulate the temperature, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go through the steps. Firstly, cool ambient temperature, somewhere between about 65 to 68 degrees. And that's usually so cold that people feel uncomfortable if they were to go to bed as they normally would in a bedroom temperature of, let's say, 72 degrees. So, what to do about it? The place where many people suffer this sort of sense of mild hypothermia is in their feet, indeed. And in fact, if you have very cold feet, it's very difficult to fall asleep. You need to get the feet to swell with blood and the hands to swell with blood to evacuate all of the heat that is trapped in the core of your body. And one way that you can do that, or you can do it in one of two ways. The first is don't overdress, don't dress the core of your body too much, but you can go to bed with thick socks. What I like to do, geriatric like, is have a hot water bottle and I put that at the end of my bed and I can warm my feet. I'm actually fortunate enough now where I don't have to do that because I have a temperature controlled mattress. Full disclosure, it's an 8 sleep mattress and I'm part of the scientific board to help develop some of that technology, but that helps me regulate it. But not everyone has that luxury. So I would say hot water bottle, thick socks, that's great. Keep the dressing of the rest of you, of the trunk of you, minimal. Bedroom temperature 65 to 68 degrees Celsius. Also, you can artificially evacuate heat before bed by having a warm bath or a hot shower. And what that does is that it will bring all of the blood that is trapped in your core out to the surface. And when you get out of the bath or the shower, you think the reason you fall asleep more easily is because you're all warm and toasty. It's the opposite. It's that all of the blood is now at the surface of your skin. You get out the bath, you get this huge emission of hot heat that's trapped in the core of your body out, and it radiates out through the outer surface, and your core body temperature plummets. And that's the reason that you fall asleep. So that would be the general best prescription. Keep the bedroom cool. Socks are absolutely fine. Hot water bottle, temperature controlled mattress if you can do it. If not, just use the trick of a hot bath or a shower 15 or 20 minutes before bed, or even 45 minutes before bed. That works too.
And I'll just add that when you are starting to get sleepy, try to notice the temperature of your extremities, your feet and your hands. It is quite amazing, but about half an hour before bed, you already start to feel that they are getting warmer than the rest of your body. And this is a sign that your body is trying to release heat. So often for me, when I go into bed and my feet are already cold, I feel like I've kind of missed a window because usually when I go into bed, they're already warm enough because they're radiating heat out. So that's another thing you can pay attention to. And I know it's a bit confusing because some parts of the body are getting cold, some parts of the body are getting hot. But the notion, like you said, Matt, is really to try to send the heat trapped in the body outside. And the way we do it is through our hands and our feet. So that's kind of the point of contact to pay attention to.
Yeah, and just to note two things. Firstly, why do we lie down to sleep? Why can't we sleep as well in a chair at 45 degrees versus lying down? One of the theories is that when we lie down, it is a far more efficient way of the body to radiate heat out of its core, it turns out. Number one. sleep is bloody remarkable. Number two, if we bring you into the laboratory and you have no time cues, you've just got four walls, no light, no watches, no nothing. And we have delightfully, prior to starting the study, inserted a rectal probe so we can measure your core body temperature. And we've got sensors on the outside of your body, on the extremities too. At the moment where your core body temperature starts to decrease rapidly and the extremities of your hands and feet start to warm up most rapidly, the point at which those two things are happening at the greatest, steepest point of the curve is the point at which we keep asking you, when do you feel sleepy? When do you feel sleepy? When do you feel sleepy? And you'll say, I don't feel sleepy. I don't feel sleepy. And then you'll say, oof, it just hit me. I feel sleepy.
Yeah.
We already knew you were going to tell us that a little bit before because we could see the transition of your core body temperature plummeting and your extremities starting to swell with blood and start to warm up. And the moment where those two things cross over is the moment where you subjectively say, I feel sleepy. Sleep is bloody remarkable, number two.
I know the Aura Ring has a temperature sensor. Do you see a spike sometimes in your hands? Have you looked at that?
There's some possibility, but what you really want is the measurement of it in two locations to be most accurate. You want the core and then you want the periphery. So it's a little bit more tricky. A long-standing partner of today's podcast is Element, spelled L-M-N-T. Element is a sugar-free electrolyte drink mix, and for me, it was the sugar-free part that made me start using it a while back. I buy my own supply just to stay objective, and beyond having electrolytes in the right balance, the other reason I'm a fan of Element is that it's scientific. If you look up the people who created the company, you'll find some pretty heavy-hitting physiology, biochemistry, and pharmacology expertise that's baked into the product. And again, all of that comes without any sugar. I also wanted to share that Element's newest limited time flavor, lemonade salt, is squeezing onto the scene Tuesday, May 20th. Anyway, I should note that this is a limited time flavor, so if you like the sound of lemon-flavored electrolyte goodness, grab some now. Happily, I badgered them, and they have agreed to give you fine folks a free 8-count sample pack with any purchase of Element if you use the link lmnt.com/MATTWALKER. So for free product with your purchase, just visit lmnt.com/MattWalker. And as I said, you'll get some free product.
All right, next question. This is a question about shift work, which is fascinating. The listener says, I'm 37 years old. I work as an anesthetic resident in the UK. The older I get, the harder I find shift work. Getting sleep during inactive periods on night shift is hard because it's after a lot of stress. And some people can just seem to go to sleep and wake up like it's an on-off button, and not me. Following night shifts, my sleep is affected for days to almost a week, with lack of sleep pressure at night and offer increased sleep pressure in the day. And it feels like a real hangover effect. I have no
Yeah.
doubt shift work has terrible consequences on health, and I would like some advice for the shifties to make tricky sleep situation better managed. It's a great
Yeah,
question.
well, yeah, first, thank you for doing what you do and being there for all of us in society when we need you most. We're immensely grateful. And your schedule does pose some significant circadian disruption, sleep debt challenges, but there are a variety of evidence-based strategies that can help mitigate some of this impact. And I think there was a great meta-analysis of all of the different clinical and experimental interventions. And the size of the impact of these was really quite statistically significant. What they found was that structured interventions that included light exposure, napping, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, and melatonin among shift workers carried the greatest vote on the election day in terms of helping you mitigate these effects. So what does that mean? The key recommendations were bright light exposure early in the night shift. And we're talking about somewhere between 2,500 to 10,000 lux. So again, you can just download a lux meter, LUX, on your phone, and you can make sure that you're getting that type of intensity of light. So early bright light exposure during your shift, and that will help push your circadian phase later, meaning that you're going to be a more alert for longer periods of time. And then you have to reverse that when you come off the night shift, use blackout glasses or sort of very thick shades for limiting daylight exposure as you're en route going back home to sleep, wherever you're going to sleep. The other thing that you can try to do is pre-shift naps of about 10 to 13 minutes. This work was done by David Dingers and Mark Rosekind, some great studies in long-haul flight pilots, and saying if you get a chance to nap throughout the entire long-haul flight, when should you do it to be able to maintain maximum alertness? And you would think, well, you could have these prophylactic naps. You would put them right at the end when you're feeling sleepiest. They found the opposite, that if you try to nap for 10 to 30 minutes right before the start of the shift, so sort of in the last 2 hours before you go to work, try to see if you can just get a little bit of a 10 to 30-minute nap. It markedly reduced the cumulative sleep debt and sleep pressure that you developed by the end of the shift, where you are really, really dragging. I would say that probably once you get home, your biggest problem hormonally is that it's light out and your circadian rhythm has stamped the brakes on melatonin, and there's no signaling to your brain that it's darkness, because it's not, it's daylight. But you want the signal of pretend darkness because you're going to try to get to sleep. So try to use somewhere between about 1 to 3 milligrams of melatonin on your way home, or essentially about an hour before you expect to go to sleep. You shouldn't use it on the way home if you're driving. That can make you drowsy, and that's very dangerous. So get home first, and then 45 minutes to an hour before bed, take your 1 to 3 milligrams of melatonin. I know the military has sort of controversially used drugs like modafinil or armodafinil, which is a wake promoting chemical. You have to do that under medical supervision, and it may improve alertness and performance, but that is not a substitute for sleep. And then the last two things I would say to administrators is try to limit consecutive night shifts to 2 to 3 in a row, and then either intersperse recovery days or try to do a rotating shift where you kind of work, let's say, an afternoon into evening shift, and then you rotate forward. Rotating back is miserable. Rotate people forward in shift work. So start to have them do the afternoon to evening shift, then the nighttime to morning shift, then the morning to late afternoon shift. If you're going to rotate them on a roster, make sure you're rotating them in forward in time in that way. So those are things that can certainly help. So combining circadian alignment, get your light in the first half of the shift, use strategic napping before you start your shift. Make sure your sleep hygiene when you get home is good. Keep your room dark, cool, and black. Blackout curtains, earplugs, eye mask are great. And then try to see if administrators will listen to people like me saying, don't do too many shifts all in continuously in one phase without any recovery days. You need those recovery days. And then if you're going to rotate shift, do it forward in time on the clock.
And doing it forward is about how it is easier for us to postpone sleep than it is to go to sleep earlier.
Yes, and we spoke a little bit about the circadian rhythm and how without these sort of light synchronizers, we all typically start to run a little bit later into the day.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of our clock runs further. So it's easier for us to run forward in time because that's what our innate circadian rhythm would like to do. And the fact that it's harder for you to force yourself to sleep than it is to force yourself to
To
stay
stay
awake.
awake, yeah. That's why it's easier traveling west than
Correct.
east.
West is best, east is tough.
We need a rhyme
Okay.
for that.
Let's go to the last question.
The last question of today. I have a question about the use of gabapentin.
Oh,
Gabapentin, sorry.
gabapentin. Sorry. Yeah.
Gabapentin for sleep. They would like to
Okay.
know more about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Gabapentin in the context of sleep is principally used for something called restless leg syndrome. And I've done an entire episode about this sleep disorder. It's a wicked, vicious sleep disorder. And there it's used to try to modulate and block the annoying, very frustrating, infuriating sensations of restless leg where you want to move your legs and you kind of need to move them and jerk them and sort of massage them. And it tries to settle down that motor cortical signaling. But gabapentin has shown, I would say, mild to moderate benefits for sleep symptoms associated with other things like neuropathic pain or menopause related hot flashes. And then in healthy individuals, there's a little bit of data that it says that it may reduce the time for which it takes you to fall asleep and may keep you asleep in a bit more of a continuous fashion. And because of those two things, it can increase your total sleep time. That's what some of the meta analyses have demonstrated. That said, though, if you look at people who are struggling with sleep and are probably looking to things like gabapentin to help them, randomized control trials in individuals with primary insomnia, not caused by pain, but just primary insomnia, you just don't seem to get much of a robust efficacy benefit from gabapentin compared to placebo. So I think folks like the American Academy of Sleep Medicine and other organizations like them, they do not recommend gabapentin as a first line insomnia treatment due to the limited effect size. And also, there's some potential concerns. You've got to be careful. You get some daytime sedation, some dizziness. There's a bit of a dependency risk. How is it doing it, by the way, if it is sort of helping with some of those motor symptoms and a little bit of sedation? It seems to act by modulating what's called the GABA system in the brain, GABA, which stands for gamma aminobutyric acid. Say that after a couple of good drinks on a Friday quickly. And it also modulates something called voltage gated calcium channels, all of which essentially are going to result in reducing the excitability of brain cells. And here it's the excitability of the brain and particularly the cortex. So if your insomnia is caused not by primary insomnia, but is caused by secondary pain or sensory motor disturbances, or things like hot flashes, then gabapentin may improve sleep. But for primary insomnia, it's just not going to really be moving the needle. Things like cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia or certain hypnotic medications remain preferable. So gabapentin may benefit sleep in select medical contexts, but it's just not effective in insomnia as a primary therapy. Alternative, better approaches exist.
Yeah, we talked about pain management in one of our AMAs, how sleep is able to disconnect the brain from peripheral signals. And when that doesn't happen, then gabapentin can help.
Exactly. You're just trying to block out that sensory, not external sensory like a noise or a disruptive flash of light, but here it's the internal signal of nociception. So, wow, we got through those questions pretty well. We covered a lot more than we normally do.
I love your questions. Keep sending them in. They are so unique and wonderful.
Yeah, we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. It's not just that they're great questions and they're so unique, but they really make us happy. It's so nice to think we're not just talking into microphones here together and it's not reaching people, but we love the fact that you're just as excited and curious about sleep as we are. So, if for no other reason than our own hedonic pleasure of realizing that you love sleep and you have questions, but we are here to serve you. Send us your questions, social media, email, shout at us on both and all of those channels. Eti, where can people find you out in the digital sphere, just so that they know?
On Twitter in Etoosh, Etoosh, and also on my Gmail, etoosh@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. I really would.
Folks, I'm sure can probably find me, unfortunately, but stick with Eti. Okay, with all of that being said, thank you, Eti, once again for being so wonderful, so insightful, keeping me on the straight and narrow, being much more additive than I ever am. Any last words?
Thank you, Matt. I think you're doing so well in covering so many topics and helping people get better sleep.
It's only because of such a wonderful sidekick, folks. Thank you. Take care, sleep well, and we will see you in the next episode. From the two of us, bye for now.